I still remember the harsh glow of the restaurant lights reflecting off polished tables, the clinking of glasses, and the soft hum of conversations around us when my life suddenly took a turn I never saw coming. It was supposed to be a simple family dinner, nothing fancy, just a chance to spend time with my son and his wife, hoping, naively, that maybe we could finally sit together without tension. My daughter-in-law sat across from me, unusually quiet, her lips pressed together like she was holding something in, while my son kept glancing at her instead of me, as if waiting for her signal. At first, everything felt normal. The waiter brought menus, poured water, smiled politely, and asked if we were ready to order. But then, without warning, my daughter-in-law placed her fork down hard against the plate and said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "I think it's time to tell the truth." The air at our table instantly changed. My heart began to pound as I looked at her, confused and uneasy. She turned toward me, pointed her finger, and said, "You stole $800 from my purse." Her words hit me like a slap. For a moment, I couldn't even speak. I stared at my son, expecting him to defend me, to laugh it off as a misunderstanding, to know better. Instead, his face hardened with anger. He raised his voice and said, "Mom, she doesn't lie." That sentence hurt more than the accusation itself. Heads turned. Conversations around us slowed. I felt heat rush to my face as shame wrapped around me like a tight knot. I quietly said, "I didn't take anything," but my voice sounded small even to my own ears. My daughter-in-law immediately added, "My purse was right here, and she was sitting next to me the whole time." She spoke so confidently, so smoothly, as if she had rehearsed it. My son leaned forward and said, "Mom, if you took it, just give it back and we can end this." Years of sacrifice, of raising him alone, of putting his needs before mine, flashed through my mind in seconds, and still he doubted me. My hands trembled as I rested them on the table and said, "I am not a thief." The restaurant felt tighter, louder, heavier. Somewhere nearby, a waiter had stopped moving, quietly watching everything unfold. My daughter-in-law wiped at imaginary tears and said, "I never thought my own mother-in-law would do this to me." People nearby shook their heads, already judging me. My son kept telling me, "Please don't make a scene," not realizing that the scene had already been made for me. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, knowing this was only the beginning, and unaware that the person who would soon expose the truth was standing closer than any of us realized. The silence at our table felt unbearable, thick with judgment and disbelief, as my daughter-in-law sat there playing the role of the victim flawlessly. My son avoided my eyes, rubbing his forehead like he was already exhausted by a problem he believed I had caused. I noticed people whispering, a couple at the next table openly staring, their expressions saying everything they didn't dare speak. My daughter-in-law sighed dramatically and said, "I didn't want to do this in public, but I can't ignore it," as if she were the one being wronged. She opened her purse wide, turning it toward my son, showing him the empty space where the money was supposedly kept. "I counted it before we came in," she added calmly, each word landing like a nail in my chest. My son nodded slowly, his disappointment obvious, and that hurt more than any raised voice ever could. I tried again to explain, telling him I had no reason to steal, that I had my own money, my own dignity, but it felt like my words were bouncing off a wall already built against me. My daughter-in-law leaned back, crossing her arms, and said softly, "I just want honesty," making herself sound reasonable while stripping me of mine. That's when the waiter returned, holding our drinks, and paused when he sensed the tension. He looked from my son to me, then to my daughter-in-law, clearly unsure whether to interrupt. She waved him off impatiently, but he didn't leave right away. Instead, he stood there, watching, listening, his eyes narrowing slightly as if something didn't sit right with him. My son finally said, "Let's just finish dinner," as if food could erase humiliation. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, not because of the accusation alone, but because the child I raised was choosing silence over truth. I lowered my gaze, gripping my napkin tightly, unaware that the waiter had already noticed something important, something that would soon change the entire night and expose a lie no one at the table was prepared for. As the waiter stood there longer than expected, I could feel the tension tightening with every passing second. He set the drinks down carefully, but instead of walking away, his eyes stayed fixed on my daughter-in-law's purse, which she had left open on the chair beside her. My son didn't notice, still focused on the idea that the situation was already decided. My daughter-in-law cleared her throat and said, "Can we please not drag this out?" Her voice sounded calm, but there was a hint of irritation underneath. The waiter shifted his weight and politely asked if everything was all right. My son quickly replied that it was a private family matter. The waiter nodded, but something about his expression changed, like he had seen this kind of moment before. I sat there in silence, feeling small, replaying every second in my mind, wondering how I had ended up being treated like a criminal in front of strangers. Then the waiter spoke again, carefully choosing his words. He mentioned that earlier, when he had cleared the table near the entrance, he had noticed someone bend down near our booth. My daughter-in-law stiffened for just a split second before forcing a smile. My son looked up, confused, and asked what he meant. The waiter explained that he didn't think much of it at the time, but now, hearing about missing money, it seemed important. My daughter-in-law laughed nervously and said there were many people walking by. But the waiter calmly continued, saying the person he saw matched her description and was holding the same purse. The air shifted instantly. My son turned toward his wife, his confidence shaken for the first time. I felt my heart race, not with relief yet, but with a fragile hope. The waiter apologized for interrupting but said he believed in being honest, especially when someone's reputation was at stake. My daughter-in-law's fingers tightened around her napkin, her earlier confidence beginning to crack. While my son sat frozen, caught between what he had believed and what was now unfolding right in front of him. The restaurant seemed to grow quieter as the waiter's words sank in, and suddenly all eyes at our table were on my daughter-in-law. She shifted in her seat, forcing another smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. My son asked her what the waiter was talking about, his voice lower now, uncertain. She brushed it off, saying the waiter must be mistaken, that she never left the table. The waiter remained calm and respectful, explaining that the restaurant's entrance camera covered that area and that he had seen the footage before during his shift. At the mention of cameras, my daughter-in-law's face drained of color. She quickly changed her tone, accusing the waiter of being inappropriate and invading our privacy. My son looked between them, clearly conflicted, no longer as sure as he had been earlier. I sat silently, my heart pounding, afraid to hope too much. The waiter continued, saying he wasn't making accusations, only sharing what he observed. He mentioned that the person he saw had crouched down near the booth, as if picking something up, before slipping it into the purse. The restaurant manager, noticing the tension, slowly approached our table. My daughter-in-law crossed her arms tightly, her defensiveness growing. My son asked the manager if there really were cameras. The manager nodded and said they were placed for customer safety. A heavy pause followed. The confidence my daughter-in-law had shown earlier was fading, replaced by impatience and anger. She insisted they were wasting time and demanded to leave. That was when my son finally asked the question he hadn't dared ask before, if the cameras could be checked. In that moment, the truth felt closer than ever, hanging in the air, ready to come crashing down. The moment my son suggested checking the cameras, my daughter-in-law's reaction said more than her words ever could. She let out a sharp laugh and said it wasn't necessary, that this was turning into a ridiculous spectacle over just money. The manager politely explained that reviewing the footage would only take a few minutes and could clear up the misunderstanding. My daughter-in-law suddenly stood up, grabbed her purse, and said she was done being disrespected. That movement caught everyone's attention, especially when the waiter quietly pointed out that this was the same purse he had seen earlier near the entrance. My son hesitated, then gently asked her to sit back down. Her jaw tightened as she reluctantly returned to her seat. The manager asked if anyone objected to reviewing the footage. I stayed silent, afraid that speaking might somehow make things worse. My son nodded, though his expression was heavy with doubt and regret. As the manager walked away to check the cameras, time seemed to slow. My daughter-in-law tapped her foot nervously, her earlier calm completely gone. She avoided eye contact, staring instead at the table, while my son finally looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time that night. There was uncertainty in his eyes now, and something else too, something that looked a lot like guilt. Around us, the restaurant buzz slowly returned, but our table felt frozen in a moment of truth. I held my breath, knowing that whatever happened next would change our family forever, and that the lie, if it truly was a lie, was about to be exposed in a way no one could ignore. The minutes dragged on as we waited, each second heavier than the last, and the sound of my daughter-in-law's nervous foot tapping felt unbearably loud. My son finally broke the silence, asking her again if she was absolutely sure about what she had accused me of. She snapped back that she wouldn't lie about something so serious, but her voice lacked the confidence it had earlier. I watched my son struggle, torn between loyalty to his wife and the truth he was starting to fear. When the manager returned, his expression was serious, and the waiter stood beside him. The manager said the footage had been reviewed and asked us to step closer so he could explain. My daughter-in-law immediately said there was no need and that they should just leave, but my son quietly told her to wait. The manager explained that the camera showed her standing up earlier, walking toward the entrance with her purse, and bending down near the booth before returning to her seat. My heart pounded as the manager added that while the camera didn't clearly show cash, it did show her placing something into the purse. The color drained from my daughter-in-law's face, and she began to argue that the footage proved nothing. My son looked at her, stunned, as if he were seeing her for the first time. I sat there, barely breathing, realizing that the truth was finally rising to the surface. The manager said gently that based on what they saw, the accusation against me didn't appear fair. In that moment, the weight I had been carrying began to lift, even as the reality of what my son had believed started to sink in for him. The manager's words hung in the air, and suddenly the confidence my daughter-in-law had clung to all night completely shattered. She began talking faster, insisting the footage was being misunderstood, that anyone could have bent down near the booth, that this proved nothing at all. My son didn't respond right away. He stared at her, his face tight with disbelief and hurt, as if pieces of a puzzle he had ignored were finally snapping into place. For the first time, he asked her directly where the $800 had gone. She avoided the question, accusing everyone of turning against her. The waiter quietly mentioned that the amount of money matched what had been taken from another guest earlier in the week, a case that had already been reported. That statement made her freeze. The restaurant felt unbearably quiet as my son asked her again to open her purse. She refused, clutching it tightly to her chest. The manager calmly explained that if she continued to refuse, they would have to involve security. My son's voice cracked as he asked her why she wouldn't just show it and end this. Tears filled her eyes, but they no longer convinced anyone. I watched my son's shoulders slump as the truth became impossible to ignore. He looked at me then, shame written all over his face, realizing too late that he had believed a lie and let his own mother be humiliated in public. My daughter-in-law's hands trembled as my son finally demanded she open her purse, and the room seemed to hold its breath. She slowly unzipped it, her eyes darting nervously, as my son leaned forward, waiting. Everyone at the table was silent, and I felt a mix of fear and anticipation swirling in my chest. The manager and the waiter watched quietly, giving space but ready to intervene if needed. My daughter-in-law hesitated, then pulled out a small stack of bills, not the full amount she had claimed. My son's expression darkened, confusion and anger mixing together. He asked her where the rest of the money was, and she stammered, unable to meet anyone's gaze. I could see her carefully avoiding the truth, twisting her story, but the evidence from the cameras and the waiter's observations had already cornered her. My son's voice shook as he said, "I can't believe you would lie like this." She tried to cry, but it came out hollow, unconvincing. The waiter cleared his throat, reminding everyone politely that honesty mattered, and the manager nodded in agreement. Around us, other diners started to glance, sensing the tension, while my son realized how badly he had misjudged me. I stayed silent, letting him see the truth for himself, knowing that nothing could erase the humiliation I had endured, but now the scales were finally tipping in my favor. My daughter-in-law's confident facade was crumbling, and the moment of reckoning had arrived. My daughter-in-law's face was pale, her earlier bravado completely gone, as my son demanded she explain the missing money. She opened her mouth, but no words came out clearly, just stammering excuses that sounded worse with every sentence. The manager and waiter exchanged glances, silently supporting the truth that had been hiding in plain sight. My son's hands tightened into fists on the table, his jaw rigid, as he processed everything he had just learned. I finally spoke, my voice steady despite the adrenaline racing through me, reminding him that I had been honest all along, and that nothing in that restaurant justified such an accusation. He turned to look at me, guilt washing over his features, finally realizing how wrong he had been to trust a lie over his own mother. My daughter-in-law tried to interrupt, blaming misunderstandings and coincidences, but the waiter stepped forward calmly, recounting exactly what he had seen near the entrance and how it contradicted her story. The manager quietly confirmed that the footage backed up the observations. My son's eyes widened as the pieces clicked together, and he slowly said, "Mom." But couldn't finish. I gave him a look that didn't need words. He understood now, and the weight of his misjudgment hung heavy between us. Around us, the tension in the restaurant had shifted. People were whispering, some staring, sensing that the night's drama had turned in my favor. My daughter-in-law slumped in her seat, realizing for the first time that her lie was unraveling, that the truth had caught up with her in front of everyone she wanted to impress. My daughter-in-law sat there frozen, as my son stared at her in disbelief, the anger and betrayal mixing on his face. The waiter quietly explained again that he had seen everything, how she had bent down near the booth and then returned to her seat with the purse. The manager confirmed that the cameras supported his account. My son's eyes shifted to me, his guilt finally apparent, and he whispered, "Mom, I should have believed you." I stayed calm, letting him see the truth unfold fully, watching as realization replaced doubt. She tried to speak, her voice shaking, claiming misunderstandings, blaming timing, trying to twist the story, but the evidence was undeniable. Around us, other diners had begun to notice the tension, some leaning in subtly, sensing that justice was quietly being served at our table. My son took a deep breath and said, "I can't believe I didn't trust you," his voice thick with regret. My daughter-in-law's confident mask had completely fallen, her earlier claims of innocence crumbling under the weight of proof. The waiter gave a small, respectful nod, and the manager said softly that honesty always mattered, no matter how uncomfortable it was to face. I could feel the tension finally release from my shoulders, though the emotional scars of the accusation still burned. My son reached for my hand, silently apologizing, and I squeezed it back, letting him know he had finally understood the truth. My daughter-in-law sat quietly, defeated, aware that her reputation had been irreparably damaged in front of everyone. The restaurant seemed to breathe again, the crisis diffusing, and the night slowly shifted from shame to vindication. The moment hung in the air as my son looked at me with eyes full of remorse, finally realizing how blindly he had trusted the wrong person. My daughter-in-law avoided his gaze, slumping in her chair, her earlier confidence completely gone. The waiter and manager quietly stepped back, letting the family face the truth for themselves, while nearby diners continued their meals, some glancing curiously but discreetly. My son reached out and said, "Mom, I'm so sorry. I should never have doubted you." I nodded, my voice calm but filled with emotion. "It's okay, the truth is what matters." The weight of the night's humiliation began to lift from me, replaced by relief and a quiet sense of justice. My daughter-in-law tried to speak again, mumbling apologies that sounded hollow and forced. My son shook his head, his disappointment clear, and said firmly, "We need honesty in this family. Lies can't be tolerated." The manager added that the restaurant supported integrity, and the waiter quietly agreed, reinforcing that the truth always surfaces. I felt my son squeeze my hand gently, a silent acknowledgement that he now knew who had truly been honest. Around us, life at the restaurant began returning to normal, but at our table, a lesson had been learned, a lesson about trust, honesty, and the cost of deception. My daughter-in-law's facade had fallen completely, and it was clear to everyone witnessing that the story of deceit had finally reached its conclusion. The air felt lighter, but the memory of that accusation and the way it had hurt would never fully fade. After the tension broke, my son and I sat in silence for a few moments, letting the truth settle between us. My daughter-in-law remained quiet, her eyes downcast, realizing that her lies had not only been exposed but had cost her the trust of everyone at the table. The waiter quietly returned to his duties, but his presence reminded us that honesty had prevailed tonight. My son kept glancing at me, still shaken by the weight of the misunderstanding and the realization that he had almost lost faith in me over a lie. I finally spoke softly, "What matters is that we know the truth now." He nodded, swallowing hard, and murmured, "I was wrong. I should have trusted you from the start." The manager discreetly stepped away, but not before giving a small nod toward me, acknowledging that integrity had won. My daughter-in-law sat frozen, no words left to defend herself, fully aware that the consequences of deception were now clear to everyone present. Around us, the restaurant slowly returned to normal, but the atmosphere at our table had permanently shifted. Honesty had prevailed, trust had been restored, and the lesson was unforgettable. I felt a deep sense of relief, though the sting of betrayal lingered, a reminder that truth always matters, and lies are never worth it, no matter how carefully they are hidden. That night, I realized something profound. Even in the face of false accusations, standing by the truth and remaining patient can ultimately reveal the real story. The night ended with a heavy, but clear sense of closure. My son looked at me with eyes full of apology, finally understanding the depth of the betrayal he had almost unknowingly supported. My daughter-in-law sat quietly, her facade completely gone, the weight of her lies hanging heavily on her shoulders. I felt a mixture of relief and quiet triumph, knowing that the truth had not only cleared my name but had also taught a lesson about honesty, trust, and integrity that could never be forgotten. The waiter returned to serve other tables, and the manager discreetly watched, a silent acknowledgement that justice had quietly been restored. My son reached out, holding my hand, and said, "I believe you, Mom. I should never have doubted you." I smiled gently, squeezing his hand, letting him know that despite the pain of that evening, our bond had grown stronger. Around us, the restaurant slowly returned to its normal rhythm, but the memory of the accusation and the ultimate revelation would stay with us forever. I realized something essential that night. No matter how confident a lie may appear, the truth has a way of coming out, and when it does, it changes everything. For the first time that night, I truly felt vindicated, respected, and finally at peace, knowing that honesty always wins in the end, and those who try to manipulate it will face the consequences.